got me as a, Will, have you got me as a co-host?
We'll do that next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Jefferson Public Utility District for Jefferson County. Today is Tuesday, April 5th. It is 3 p.m. And I would like to read, hopefully for one of the last times, per the governor's extended proclamation 2028 and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jefferson County PD no longer provides an in-person room for meetings of the Board of Commissioners. All meetings are held remotely via Zoom. Participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand to indicate that you would like to speak. I'd like to now determine that we have a quorum of the board. I'm Kenneth Collins, Chair of the Board, Commissioner for District 2.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner, District 1.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
We are all here. So we definitely have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? General Manager Kevin Street.
Yes, I would like to add a closed session, union negotiations, right after the potential litigation executive session. And then I would also like to remove 8.3 wholesale service agreement and put that on the next meeting.
All right. On my agenda, that's 8.2. Do I have an older copy of the agenda?
Let me bring mine up.
8.2 is now Commissioner Insurance Benefits. 8.3 is revised wholesale telecom service agreement.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And that's on the website, the packet on the website. So I guess my only change would be to pull an item off the consent agenda, but I can't remember if that's a separate motion.
I think it is a separate motion.
Okay.
Any other changes to the general agenda?
There is a errant reference to an executive session. I think I gave you, Commissioner Collins, the proper citation. It's RCW 42, at least on my copy, 4230.110 sub 1 sub I. And I know when you go back in, you'll provide that, but I just for the record.
Joel, is that what the executive session is supposed to read?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It doesn't read that on the official agenda. Thanks.
And that's what I'll read.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Cami.
So are there any other changes, additions, or corrections to our agenda for this afternoon?
I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as revised.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. We have approved our agenda. The next item is the first of two executive sessions. With reference to RCW 42.30.1110, subsection I, subsection 1, subsection I, to discuss with legal counsel representing the PUD potential litigation to which the agency is likely to become a party. How much time should we allocate for that?
5 minutes, Joel.
Yeah, 7, let's say 7.
Okay,
So it is 3:05 and that would make it 3:12. Will, would you facilitate our going into a separate room, please? Yep. We have completed the first of 2 executive sessions. We are now going to adjourn again for the second executive session per RCW 42.30.140 subsection 4 subsection A. We will have a closed session of the board to discuss negotiations with the PUD's labor unions. Kevin, how much time do you anticipate we'll need?
30 minutes.
So it's now 3:15 and we will now adjourn to the breakout room and resume at 3:45. Actually, we should have a break then of 15 minutes. Is that okay? Is that agreeable? And then do the regular board meeting at 4. We have now completed the second of 2 executive sessions. And we are going to take a 15-minute recess and resume our regular Board of Commissioners meeting promptly at 4 p.m. Good afternoon. It is approximately 4 o'clock. There it is. It's 4 o'clock. We are resuming the Board of Commissioner meeting of the Jefferson County Public Utility District. We have concluded earlier 2 executive sessions. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Before we do that, I'd like to ascertain that we still have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners. I'm Kenneth Collins, Chair of the Board, Commissioner for District 2.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner, District 1.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
The public comment period allows members of the public to comment, limited to 3 minutes each, on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the board chair and are not permitted to disturb, disrupt, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commissioners' meeting. After an initial warning by the president or the designated chair of the meeting, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. So with that, I'd like to commence public comment. And I see a hand. I recognize just an initial J there. So please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there, this is Jody Wilkie. I just have a very short comment and a request at this point. I went to the PUD building to pay my bill because I was in the neighborhood and found that it is still not open to the public, despite the fact that the county and city buildings are open to the public and virtually everything else is. I'm curious to know when the PUD will be open to the public so people like me and the person who came after me, so we don't have to stand in the parking lot while employees from the county or from the PUD run back and forth to their desks to provide service to people who wait in the parking lot for service for paying their bills. So I don't know if you have an answer or not, but that's my comment and my request. Thank you.
Thank you. That's going to be discussed a little later on the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much. I hope you guys will open.
Tom Tersch.
Oh, hi there. Good afternoon. I wanted to bring to your attention a bill that I've been following during this last legislative session, House Bill 1329, which makes a couple of important changes under the Open Public Meetings Act that I think you need to be aware of. One thing that it absolutely requires is that you have to include in your minutes the reason for entering it into executive session. I think you probably do that already, but right now it's mandatory, not something that's nice to have. One of the other more important aspects of the bill says that you must, if you allow any public comments at all during your meetings, which you do, and by the way, you guys do a great job of that, unlike many other agencies. If you allow any public comments, you also have to make an allowance for written public comments as well as oral public comments. And any written public comments that are received have to be delivered to each of the members of the governing body. In other words, to each of you three commissioners prior to the meeting. So in order to make that reasonable and workable, it would be a good idea for you to put on the agenda an email address to which public comments should be directed, and maybe set a cutoff time prior to the meeting so that you can be ensured that any comments received are delivered to the commissioners, before the meeting starts. I think that'd be an important and useful thing to alert the public as to what their responsibilities are to get their comments heard. The last thing is not related to that bill, but just in general, when you go into executive session, I think it would be helpful if you would identify the participants in the executive session. You're not required to do that, other than if it's for purposes that require an attorney present, you have to say that. But just in general, I think it would be helpful to know who the participants are in your executive sessions. And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comments? Okay, we have somebody on the line with their hand up. There's nothing identifying them, but please go ahead.
Hello, that's me, Roger Risley, District 2.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Roger. Yes, yes. Hi, Roger.
Thank you, Commissioner. June 1st, I think we have a rate increase coming. Is that automatic, or will the public get a chance to comment on that? Will there be an agenda item on that? And secondly, I'm concerned about a follow-up on the streetlights in Quilcene that may or may not have been turned out. I'm concerned about disinvestment in the South County, and also the fact that that's a public good and should be shared by all equally. Thank you. Those are my comments and questions.
General Manager Street, I'm wondering if you could address those questions when it comes time for the manager's report. Great.
Ken, just real quick, on the streetlights in Quilcene, a deal was worked out between the county and the PUD, and the lights are on. We're doing some upgrades, but that has been taken care of.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that.
Scott Bancroft.
Hi, all. I just wanted to say, if it wasn't for Kevin and Monty Reiners from the county, that wouldn't have happened. They came together and worked it out real well, and everything was very smooth in transitioning. So thank you, Kevin, for those streetlights, and Monty.
Very good. And I can't tell, Roger, do you still have your hand up or is this someone new with their hand up?
No, I don't, and I'm going on mute. Thank you.
So whoever has their hand up, who's called in, please go ahead.
I think that is Roger, Ken. I think that's Roger's hand. That's
Yeah,
still.
they disappeared. Yep, yep. Are there any additional public comments? Okay, seeing no raised hands, and we will move forward in our agenda to the consent agenda. And Commissioner Randall, I believe you indicated earlier that you wanted a change in the consent agenda.
Yes, thank you, Ken. Wanted to remove the calendar from the consent agenda so we could talk about that briefly. I had a question on one of the items, a clarification, and I would suggest we put it after the manager and staff reports. I think it'd be easiest handled right there.
Okay. Can be done. So if there are no additional changes to the consent agenda, no items that need to be pulled off for further discussion, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as modified.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
The consent agenda has been approved. And the next item, item number 6, is the manager and staff reports. Kevin, that would be you.
I'm gonna jump in on the hybrid meeting 6.1, and Melanie will follow with her comments. So the boardroom at 310 Four Corners is where Will is right now, and you can see his little picture on the screen. And that room is ready to go for hybrid meetings. So we have a couple things for the first couple hybrid meetings. We're gonna request that staff and the public who can stay home at Zoom till we get some things worked out. Now there will be space at 310, and the public is welcome to come there. These are things the board we need to work through. Is for example, the county is saying, okay, masks are recommended but not required, and that is kind of consistent with the rest of Jefferson County. Spacing will depend on the number of people to the meeting, which could be a little bit of problematic at the first few until we give a feel how many are going to be attending. But we do have some overflow options at 310 where we can try to keep spacing, if we get quite a few people. And then how it does work, if we get more people in the building than we can accommodate, we would just postpone that meeting and reschedule. I believe there'll be a few challenges on our first couple meetings where we're doing a hybrid, where some people in the audience and some remote, but we are ready. We just need to set a date, and then we also need to talk about the office. If we start opening for board meetings, should we open the office, and what precautions do we want to keep in place during those times? So
Commissioner Randall.
So thanks, Kevin, for sharing those thoughts on how we would safely reopen the meetings. I'm just going to offer a couple suggestions. One would be to actually simulate how, what safe spacing means and how many people that equates to, and that I would encourage us to consider a policy that basically announces that room under the current situation with safe spacing standards will accommodate X number of people, whether that's 12 or 15 or 20 or whatever it is, and that we establish that the first X number of people who show up get in the room. And until more people leave, nobody else gets in, because when you say that we would reschedule the meeting, that affects the business of the PUD. And I don't think we can have public participation be a negative. I think we want to allow for it, but we have physical constraints, and that encouraging folks to participate via Zoom now because we have limited seating. I think those all go together, but I would not be in favor of canceling a meeting because too many people show up. I'll just stop there.
I'll have to have Joel do some research, but I believe it's an RCW. If we can't accommodate them in the rooms provided, the RCW says we have to stop the meeting and set a new date. So that's not necessarily a PUD recommendation. That is an RCW on overflow. But we do have spaces that we've designated where there's some televisions. It would be basically out in the lobby as you come in. There's that TV there. So we think we can accommodate the people. But if it is a hot topic, we may, and Jeff, I appreciate the spacing. How many people can we fit in there? In the old days, we packed everybody in shoulder to shoulder, and probably can't do that now. But the county is going to try to keep 6-foot spacing. The city, the last I heard, was no spacing at all. You could just, if there was 3 people in the room, they could spread out. If there was 30, it would be pretty much shoulder to shoulder. So there are a lot of questions on how this is going to smoothly roll out. So I appreciate your comments. I do. Thank you.
Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, Kevin answered a little bit of it there to a certain extent. Now, my question was going to be is, what is the county, requirement through, county health as far as, distancing? Is there a distancing limit in place now, or is it just up to each individual jurisdiction to determine that, or business, or whatever, facility it is to make that determination? The other would be is, what is our fire capacity? I mean, we have that as our starting point. There's a certain number of people that we can't go beyond, for the fire marshal's rules. What is that number? And we should be working obviously backwards from there.
So, and I'm going by, I know we have a certification, but I'm going to say it is 9 people or 49 people in the room. With the amount of door exits, that's usually the size of room what we would allow to have. So we're going to start with 49. And that's one of the recommendations, is why staff is going to join via Zoom. Because on a big board meeting, we may get 10, 12 staff members, and pretty quick that fills that room up with everybody. So the recommendation will be for staff to join via Zoom to make room for the public.
Kevin, is it still an option for us to do the board meetings at the fire station? I mean, that's a very large room, and that would accommodate quite a few people who are I don't want to say spaced out, spaced apart safely.
Our hope is that we can do the spacing in our boardroom. It makes it a little easier if we can, use our space. So I for a long time, the fire district wouldn't allow us to use that hall because it was part of the EOC. But I'm not sure if they're letting people use it or not. I could check on that, Ken.
Well, to do a hybrid meeting though, how hard would it be for us to take this on the road? I mean, that would be, to do a hybrid meeting at another venue.
Actually, Dan, we're getting set up to be able to do meetings on the road. We're going to propose one of our working board meetings to be here at 191 Auto and use some gear that we've recently purchased to make that doable. So not quite there yet. 310 is set up and ready to go, but we are looking at being able to do some board meetings at other locations also through the hybrid system.
Don?
Well, as part of the EOC group and the incident management team, we did meet at the fire hall, but they may have improved it by now, but there was some problem with getting the telecommunication gear to work correctly. So unless it's changed, I think it's going to be a challenge for a hybrid meeting.
Mhm.
So we did have a public comment question that related to opening the lobby as well. Do you want to discuss that at this same point, Kevin?
Yes, I would like to, if there's no more questions on the meetings, I would like to query the commissioners. Do we want to try to do the meeting on the 19th as our first hybrid or wait till the first meeting in May?
Well, I would personally prefer waiting until the first meeting in May.
Okay.
Well, if you're looking for consensus, sooner the better. I mean, I'm not against waiting till May, but the sooner the better that we get to, start to make these moves towards getting the public back involved.
Yeah, I'll just throw in for me at this point, unless something radically changes, and that gives us some time to see what this latest COVID variant does. If we continue to see the downward trend, which we've been seeing for a month or two, that would be, or at least staying where it is, that would be really encouraging. So I would support the May date also.
Thank you. We are, and Melanie can talk about this, but we are looking to start bringing back some people and looking at future dates to open the office. Do you want to jump in, Melanie?
Yeah, so based on the discussions that Kevin and I have had, and looking at the recent trends in Jefferson County on COVID cases, our COVID case count was at a mild level. Recently, it's jumped up to a moderate level. So that's a new development. But before that development, we had discussed opening the office to the public on May 1st. So in the near future, but we think that would still give us time to bring our staff back. We do have a lot of our staff working remotely for those who can work remotely in office positions. So, that would give us a couple weeks to transition our staff back and think about the staffing levels at the front desk, and to also really think about the safety precautions for those CSRs that are working at that front desk. If we need to install any additional barriers or safety measures of that nature. So tentatively, that was the date that we were looking at. Like I said, there's been a recent development and we've seen an uptick in COVID cases, unfortunately.
So again, Melanie, the tentative date was what?
So we had talked about May 1st. May 1st is a Sunday, so May 2nd.
Thank you. Commissioner Topher.
So for Dawn or Melanie, or maybe whoever wants to answer this, so the uptick, is this just in positive cases or is this in hospitalizations? I mean, what's the metric exactly when you say there's an uptick? What exactly does that take into account? And I apologize for not having my video on. I'm getting low bandwidth messages here, so I'm going to keep my video off.
Dawn, would you like to
Sure,
answer
sure,
that one based
sure.
on EOC?
It's based on the case rate of number of cases per 100,000. It's a standard case rate metrics they've been using in every county. So per 100,000, the case rate for us went from low to moderate.
Don, what do we know about hospitalizations?
Hospitalizations have been pretty darn low. In fact, I think we only had a couple cases that were actually in the hospital. I think one of them's gone home now. So, I mean, we've been doing a very good job here. It's just that there's some concern that we're heading back in the wrong direction. We'll have to wait. You know, unfortunately, time is the only thing that will tell you how you're doing here in the future. And every week they update the stats. So hopefully by next week, the end of this week, we'll see another number.
It's hard to tell whether the case rate is an undercount because I don't think there's any requirement on people who are taking a home test.
Therein lies the problem, Ken. The fear is that we've been underreporting because people that have home kits that test positive don't report.
Yeah.
So the numbers have been running on, we think their numbers have been actually running higher all along here, but we don't know exactly how high.
And of course, there's a lag time between coming down with the virus and having to go to the hospital if you're unfortunate enough to become really sick with it.
What we do know is 81%, a little over 81% of the folks have had started a series or have completed the vaccinations. 76 of those have completed the entire series, and 72% of those people have actually had a booster. So we're top of the state county-wise on people that are supporting the vaccines.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kevin, anything more for your report or members of your staff? There's item 6.2 on redistricting.
So on the 19th at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a hearing and adopt the redistricting that the county has done in the last couple months. We're going to recommend as staff that we do the exact same districts that the county approved and move forward. So this is just an FYI. Annette has advertised in the paper, and Joel has a resolution ready to go. And it's a formality, but it's something we have to do.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, Kevin, could you get us those maps, the finalized map for whatever the county finally settled on, so we could, review that before we get to that meeting?
Yes, we'll get them. I won't do it this evening, but we'll get them sent out tomorrow, the county's maps for redistricting.
Commissioner Randall, you had wanted the calendar pulled off of the consent agenda.
Yes. So the item I found on the calendar is listed under April 21st, 2022, that we would have a special meeting from 10 to 12, and it's listed as the WAPEG WPEG power purchase update. And I'm assuming that's referring to WAPAG WPAG, which stands for, my understanding is Washington Public Agency Group. And the reason I pulled that out was, we can get acronym heavy, but I think it's really important that everybody on staff knows what these acronyms stand for, especially this one, which is one that we have a membership with and we participate in, and that they need to know what the name stands for and what it is. So wanted to have that corrected on the calendar and make sure that staff knows what that group is. Okay.
Thank
Kevin,
you.
Thanks.
So do we need a motion to adopt that revised calendar now and be done with that, or what do you want to do?
Dan, you are correct. So I would make the motion that we would approve that modified calendar. Thanks for that.
I'll second the motion. Sorry.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Calendar as revised has been approved. And next item on the agenda is the commissioner reports. Commissioner Tupper, would you please begin?
Yeah, thanks. I attended the Waputa Commissioner Training on March 16th. There was a great presentation by Liz Anderson of Waputa on how to communicate with the media. I attended all the Waputa committee meetings on March 17th. The Commissioner Education topic for next month will be, I believe, on workplace culture, leadership, and team building. So that's something that staff may want to take advantage of on that particular date. At the Water Committee, there was a brief update on legislation relating to water. Nothing of consequence made it through that negatively impacts the water utilities, at least that came up at that meeting. The budget that passed, though, the state budget that passed does continue the pattern of robbing the Public Works Board account that could go to water and wastewater projects. They took $57 million a year for the next 15 years out, as I know you all are, the other two commissioners are well aware of that. That really cuts back on water and wastewater, purveyors being able to, keep up with things. So something you might want to talk to your legislators about at some point in time. The roundtable for the water meeting was based on arrearages. Most water utilities have weathered things pretty well. There's likely to be some funding available for arrearages through Commerce Department at the state level, but timelines are sketchy and how much will be available is still uncertain. I found the guest speaker at the Government Relations Committee meeting to be very informative. Renee Ratcliffe Sinclair from TVW in Olympia gave a very comprehensive recap of bills, funding, and the budget totals that came out of the legislative session. $64 billion state budget, largest ever. It was kind of interesting. A lot of federal money getting infused into the state. I attended the Waputa Board of Directors meeting on the 18th. I attended the BOC special meeting on March 22nd. I attended the Waputa quarterly water meeting on the 24th. Representatives from the State Department of Drinking Water, Department of Ecology, and the Public Works Board gave post-legislature updates. Again, a lot of the same stuff that I already talked about. There were discussions related to arrearages, infrastructure funding, and municipal water law issues on water banking and water rights is something that's really getting a lot of attention and pressures that and I know that staff is on top of this here at our utility, working towards making sure that we're protecting our ability to provide services and have the water, the quantities that we need. I met with Kevin Street on the 25th of March. I attended the PPC Executive Board meeting on March 29th. That board voted to move the concept paper on to BPA. The paper was endorsed by WAPAG, by PNGC and NRU. So all the other big partnerships around the region are on board with that. And hopefully we'll be hearing back from BPA here in the next month or two about where we're going to go with all that. I will attend the Public Power Council Member Forum and Executive Committee meeting on April 6th and 7th. I will listen in on the PPC Markets 101 tutorial on March 11th. I will meet with Kevin Street on the 12th, and I will attend the Waputa meetings in Tulalip on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of March. And that's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Randall.
Thanks, Dan. On the 16th of March, the Simsway coordinating group met. That's the Port City County and us group. I represented the board, and we got some additional information on that project. That at that meeting and a more recent meeting, one of the issues is the port is now estimating the quantity of fill that it would take to expand the boatyard to their property line would be about 4,000 cubic yards, which goes above the SEPA threshold. So they are looking at needing to do a SEPA checklist and going through the SEPA process if they intend to continue with that proposal, which they do. The city now has their first stakeholder meeting on the Simsway expansion project, Simsway Port expansion project for April 12th at 4:30. And they've got some interesting, they're trying to protect that process by having the public be able to watch but not participate, because that group is actually an advisory body to their Parks and Recreation board, so that folks who want to make comments about what's happening at that group would actually do it before the Parks board. And the city now has a web page devoted to the Simsway Gateway and Boatyard expansion project up, and Will, thank you for getting a link on our website to that page. And basically everything that is available on that project is listed on that page, including the most recent arborist report, which does identify the current status of the trees, and the arborist opinion that was hired by the port. They did find a number of deficiencies in the poplars and provided some very detailed recommendations. So I think that's helpful. Let's see, on the 17th and 18th, also participated in the WAPUTA meetings, and in the Energy Committee, we had a number of bills which we've talked about, and most of them kind of center on beneficial electrification. And one of the items that came up at this meeting was a discussion about trying to provide feedback to the legislature on the costs of upgrading our PUD's distribution system to accommodate the anticipated level of increase in load from beneficial electrification. And I've heard numbers anywhere from a 90% increase, which is what California is estimating, up to, I think, a 200% increase. Then the question is, over what period of time? So WAPUTA staff was talking about possibly sending out a query to all the PUDs and giving them some sort of basis for an assumption of how much increase over what period of time. And then we would provide feedback on, here's what we think it would cost to do that. And I don't think that's going to be a quick item coming to us, but there was just this discussion of trying to generate some numbers to feed back to the legislature about what the cost to our utility might be and what sort of assistance we might need, so that we're not that our infrastructure is able to handle anticipated future loads. So that was one interesting point of conversation. The
Commissioner Randall?
Yes.
The assumption there is how much electrification would be taking place. That is it transportation, or is it transportation plus all of home heating plus industrial plus?
Right. Yeah, I think those are really good questions, and I think bringing the topic up was really just an effort to provide some feedback that we keep seeing the legislature setting these goals of getting so much electrified, and that it's our responsibility as a utility provider who we want to meet those goals, but providing feedback of, yes, we can meet those goals, but here's what it's going to take. And that may be beyond our resources, or it may create an undue burden upon the current rate structure, or who knows what. But I think it was really to try and start, doing some analysis. So we'll see what comes out of WAPUTA on that one. The lunch presenter was someone from the insurance industry who was kind of talking about trends. And one of the things that really got my attention was the discussion about wildfires and the difficulty in getting insurance for wildfire risks, and what they were looking at in terms of deductibles and various things. And it made me think of the question, what is our insurance coverage per incident for wildfires currently? and per accident. So I don't know if staff can get that information or not, but I think it would be useful to look at what our current coverage is, if that's through PERMs or if we have some other layers of insurance. Let's see, attended the meeting on the 22nd, the special board meeting we had. We also had a meeting of a group through the EDC of this rural economic sector analysis. So it'll be interesting to see if we get some useful information about Jefferson County through this. Basically, it's a free study that's being put on by some folks from one of the Utah colleges. I'm not quite, it seems kind of wonky to me right now, so I'm not sure if we'll get useful, very much useful data from it, but we will see. On the 23rd and 24th, Energy Northwest board met. I participated in those meetings. They indicated, it was interesting listening to the budget of Energy Northwest. It's clear that they've really been working hard over the years to try and keep Energy Northwest's costs down, because their costs relate directly to the cost of the power that they then deliver to BPA, that then gets blended into our BPA energy costs. And they've largely kept those costs down, that below the rate of inflation due to staff cuts. And the number that they used was roughly $12 million in savings through staff reductions over time. But they also indicated that they think they're, when pressed, they asked the staff, is that going to continue? And it sounds like they kind of felt like they weren't going to be able to go any further, that they were pretty much down to kind of the minimum that they needed to run the facility. So going forward, they'll be looking at probably more increases in costs that are more like the cost of inflation. Let's see, the Nine Canyon Wind Project is approved through 2030, and they're looking at the possibility of repowering those, putting new and larger turbines on that facility. So that was kind of interesting. Then they spent a lot of time talking about the Ukraine-Russian situation and how it's affecting nuclear fuel supplies. And the good news is that the Columbia Generating Station has a solid supply of uranium for about 10 years. And however, other nuclear power stations in the United States may only have about a 12-month or up to 2-year supply, because so much of the enriched uranium used by the nuclear power plants comes from Russia. So that's apparently potentially a huge problem. They talked a little bit about that there are some European sources for enriched uranium, that they're looking to increase their capacity to offset the loss of potential long-term loss of Russian supplies, but that there is no U.S. enrichment facilities. There was one in Illinois, but it was closed in 2017. So apparently they're looking at potentially restarting that. So it's a big issue for the nuclear power industry. And in 1 month, they saw a 13% increase in the cost of uranium. So very interesting. The advanced nuclear technology is totally dependent upon Russian uranium. So one of the staff at Energy Northwest said there's no clear path forward right now for that technology, which was interesting. And that's the Energy Northwest report. And I'll be going to their next board meeting in April live. So I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to getting a tour of the Columbia Generating Station, hopefully. Our NODC, North Olympic Development Council meeting the same day. We had a very nice presentation by the Northwest Maritime Center, and it was really nice to hear that they're doing well despite having to shut down a lot of their in-person programs during COVID. They're looking forward to this year, hopefully having everything back up and alive, from classes to the Sail to Alaska program. And they've made some acquisitions. They bought the Swan Hotel property, which is across the street from the Maritime Center, and they have plans for expansion with a new building on land that's adjacent to that. So they're doing very well. On the 25th, I met with Pete Langley, who's currently the president of the Port Townsend Maritime Association, and talked about the PT Foundry and some beneficial electrification that he has considered over the years. And we got into a discussion of demand charges, which was really interesting. And a lot of beneficial electrification could be short duration, high demand use, and how we set our rates with demand charges could potentially affect our customers' ability to do some of those things. So that'll be an interesting discussion, I think, next time we talk about demand charges. On the 27th, I got a call from Kellen Lynch, who is on our Citizen Advisory Board, and he's currently in Italy on his way to Vilpoldsried, where we had those visitors in the past from Germany talking about how they had done so much to generate local power. So he's on his way there, we talked a little bit about my visit to Villepold's Reed, so I gave him some clues of what to do, things to look at. On the 28th, met with Kevin Street. On the 30th, we had our most recent Simsway coordinating meeting and a call with Joel Paisner. On the 6th, looking ahead on the 6th, I'll be participating in the PPC member forum. On the 7th, we've got an EDC Team Jefferson meeting. On the 12th, a Climate Action Committee meeting, and then I will be participating in the WAPUTA meetings from the 13th to the 15th. I'm just going to go live on that Thursday when we have our committee meetings, and I'm going to participate via Zoom on the Education Day and during the Executive Board, and that is my report.
Thank you. If I can respond to one of the questions that you raised having to do with coverage for wildfire. So the insurance is actually in layers, if you will, that the first several $1 million is self-insured through PERMs. On top of that, there is another policy. Now, I'm not sure whether that second policy is through Aegis or not. Aegis provides some of the additional coverage, but the bottom line is that we've got about $35 million of coverage. But it doesn't take too many wildfires to, as it were, burn through that.
And Ken, just a question on that. 35 million, does that cover, say, all utilities, or would that be per utility? Okay.
Well, it'd be per event.
Per event. Okay. Per utility. Okay.
We'll have a PERMS board meeting later on this month, and I'll get clarification as to exactly specifically how that coverage is constructed.
Well, I know that we really load up staff with so much work to do, but I cannot recall if we have had like a workshop dedicated to wildfire or not. The kinds of training we do with our employees, the kinds of improvements we're trying to continually make, whether it's trees cutting back or other things that are intended to prevent wildfire in the case of something happening. And I guess lastly, the kinds of training and coordination we have with the local emergency responders to try and deal with something. So I don't know if if we've had one already and I just don't recall it, or if we could maybe have something in the future, a workshop where we talk about that. Seeing a thumbs up from Kevin.
Commissioner Tupper?
Yeah, there's a second component to this wildfire thing, and that's a wildfire mitigation plan. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. Once you have one, then you're really on the hook. You can kind of plead ignorance if you don't have one, but that's something, again, like Jeff said, we don't want to weigh staff down, but we have a vegetation and management plan and, tree trimming and that sort of thing, which would be a component of a larger plan, but that's something we should probably be thinking about, not necessarily getting too crazy, even though we're coming into the wildfire stretch of the year. But that is something that we might want to check with other utilities and maybe hijack a little bit of what may be going on somewhere else to adopt a policy of our own in the interim.
Well, if I could add to that, there was that bill that addressed wildfire. Initially, it was going to trigger strict liability to utilities that if it was deemed that likely or possible that a fire started on utility property, it was going to be strict liability on utilities for any damages coming from those fires. And that legislation was changed to requiring, as you said, wildfire mitigation planning with plans submitted to the state and with recommended plan guidelines developed by the state, but no direct state oversight or approval of those plans. You basically would have to plan, they'd give us some recommendations, and then we'd have that plan on file. So I think you're right, Dan, there's more coming on this stuff. So I think just from my perspective as a commissioner, I'd appreciate to hear kind of where we're at now and what we're thinking of, so we get a little ahead of the game, because it's not going to go away. Risk of wildfire is just going to keep getting worse.
So this clearly is an important future agenda item.
Yeah, and Kevin and Don and I meet with the fire chiefs, and DNR is part of that as well, and the Forest Service. And, one of the big issues we have is the gated areas. We used to be Pope, is now Rainier, and, access. I don't know how much of our transmission lines primarily would run through state or federal type of stuff, but that's probably one of our biggest problems would be to get at stuff because the gates being locked. But we can, that's something that Kevin and Dawn and I can address as things move along into wildfire season as to what our access is.
Mhm. So I would like to do my commissioner report. Then I'll recognize Scott. I see you have something that you want to contribute. We still have a fair amount of items to cover on our agenda. So I'm going to give a brief report. The 16th, I attended the WAPUDA meetings. The 17th, also WAPUDA. And then I had a conversation with Ron Gadberg, who's president of the NOAANET board. And also later that evening, attended a meeting with residents of Beckett Point and Samantha of our director of our water department, discussing sewer rates for Beckett Point. The 18th was also the directors meeting for WAPUDA. And following that, I had a conversation with one of the commissioners from Thurston PUD. On the 22nd, I attended the special Board of Commissioners meeting. On the 23rd, had a meeting with our general manager. On the 24th, had conversation with a concerned customer about a project that has been proposed for a retreat center off of Oak Bay Road, which has a number of residents concerned about not only appearance, but the availability of water. If this retreat center, as is planned, digs a well, how is that going to impact the people who are on wells in the immediate vicinity of that and don't have any other source of water? On the 25th, I attended the Jefferson Broadband Action Team meeting. Looking ahead, tomorrow I'll have a meeting with our general manager, and also I'll have a conversation with the PUD Association Vice President, Gary Arsenault. On the 8th, the Jefferson Broadband Action Team again. On the 11th, I look forward to the Citizen Advisory Board meeting that I'll be attending. Then on the 12th, the special Board of Commissioners meeting. On the 13th, another meeting with our general manager. The 15th, a Jefferson Broadband Action Team meeting. And on the 18th, again, a meeting with our general manager. Commissioner Randall,
Quick
your
question.
hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. You brought up the meeting with the Beckett Point folks on the sewer issue, and that reminded me that I thought we had, didn't we table the future increases on the Beckett Point folks until we were going to study it a little more or give them a chance to respond? Have we, is there a timeline that will come back to that issue, or do we need to affirmatively put something on the agenda to bring that one back? I guess that's kind of a question for Kevin.
Well, yes and no, because I've been pestering Kevin about providing information to the residents at Beckett Point, who've been really quite patient with our process. Apparently, pulling out the information that went to our consultant, who provided the cost figures, and understanding what some of those assumptions were isn't quite a simple matter. And so Samantha Harper and Mike Bailey have been in discussions about this. But having attended that meeting, I'm sensitive to the need that these folks have to know how are the costs calculated and are there opportunities that they have to lower the costs. So at the moment, we're all waiting, but hopefully that information will be forthcoming.
Okay, that's really helpful to hear where things stand, that staff is working on responding to questions raised by the Picket Point group about how the rates were, the proposed rates were calculated. And the second question that brought up for me was Roger's question, which I don't think we responded to, which Roger was asking, do we have an automatic rate increase kicking in June? I think was the question. I didn't hear a response back from Kevin.
I thought the automatic update was in July. I'm going to have to look at that real quick to
Okay.
see if it's July. The intent was we would roll it into some of our budget discussions.
Okay. I guess from my perspective, I remember when we adopted those rates, there was assumptions on how much load increase there would be and then how much revenue we would see coming from that. So I guess from my perspective, before we have those new rates jump up the next 4% or whatever it was, I would like to see how we're doing on our revenue from the rate increases we've had so far. And one of the topics of discussion was that if the revenue is better than anticipated, and I realize that some of that's temperature driven, but that we might make adjustments. You know, if we've got the rate set higher than we need them to be, that would be some information I would be interested in. So it's all projections. But anyway, that I would like to have that discussion, at least for my part, I would like to have that discussion before whatever that date is, if it's July or whatever.
Commissioner Tupper?
Yeah, and I would expect that we are going to take into account the supply chain issues and a lot of the changes we've made to rates and construction issues and things like that, as well as the heightened increase in labor costs for, not on just for emergencies, but on dock work even. So there's a lot of components that'll go into staff bringing us, the revenues versus expenditures, as we move forward.
Yeah, it looks like we're entering into an inflationary period, and with interruptions in supply chain, there really isn't any ceiling on the cost of materials that we need. And these things tend to spiral, unfortunately, and all of us feel the increase in the cost of gasoline. That affects everybody, and particularly, people who have commutes to work, and certainly our labor force is impacted by that. So
one other quick note too, if I could. Now we're basically talking electric increases. The water increases hit at a different time, correct? Kevin or anyone, as far as those rate increases, it's the electric, the energy costs are the ones rates we're talking about right now. Water is a different timing, isn't it?
If I remember correctly, the water was at a little different timing, Dan.
So let's move forward. Item 8.1 is the hiring incentives package.
And this just goes right to Melanie.
Okay, I will jump right in. So we are bringing back the finalized hiring incentives package before you tonight. These policies include the feedback that the commissioners gave us based on the past discussions during the past few weeks. And we're hoping to get approval by resolution tonight on these policies. And of course, I can take any questions if there's any lingering questions on these policies.
So these have been pretty thoroughly discussed at past board meetings. I'll be happy to entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Did we want to see if there's any public comment before that?
You know, once we have a motion that has been made and seconded, there is an opportunity for comment.
Okay, I will go ahead and move that we adopt a resolution establishing policies regarding hiring incentives to attract and retain PUD employees.
I'll second the motion.
So the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? And I will allow public comment at this time. Okay, seeing no hands up. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes.
Great, thank you.
So the next item is the commissioner insurance benefits.
And this one had to be separate, and it's Melanie's.
Yes, so this is related to, in a way, it's related to the hiring incentives. In those policies, there is the recommendation that we enhance our life insurance from $5,000 to $50,000 for non-represented staff. During our last special meeting, there was some discussion about including commissioners in that benefit enhancement. And I did confirm, of course, we can do that. We just have to get a separate resolution. It's a request from PERMS. So if we do want to move forward, which would be our recommendation to increase life insurance for commissioners from $5,000 to $50,000 flat rate, we would just need a signed resolution.
Commissioner Tupper and then Commissioner Randall.
So what was the annual financial impact of that increase, Melanie, over from the 5,000 we have now in coverage? I don't remember what the benefit on that was to go into the 50. What is the financial difference to insure the commissioners to that level?
Dan, I will actually have to get back to you on the exact amount on that. And I will work on that this week and follow up with the commissioners in an email.
Thank you.
Commissioner Randall.
If we're going to go ahead with this policy, I think it would be appropriate to add a whereas that reflects the fact that if this is approved, it's matching the life insurance benefits of other PUD employees. Because as it stands alone, it just sounds like we're doing something just for the commissioners, but it's in line with the other employees.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of moving it forward tonight till we get that, that further information. I don't think it's critical that this gets pushed through tonight.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, do you want to move to table the discussion until the next meeting?
Yeah, I guess we could, see if there's any public comment on it, but then I think that would be appropriate.
Tom Tersch, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to quickly point out that this would give you an opportunity to correct the typo, which is the misspelling of the word exhibit. And also it misidentifies you as Jefferson County Commissioners, not Jefferson PUD Commissioners. So just a quick note.
And I want to commend you for the time that you take to identify the various typos in PUD material. How you find the patience for that, I'm not sure, but your work is appreciated.
It's not a healthy occupation.
So either Commissioner Randall or
I'll go ahead and move that we request staff to research those items that we brought up and that we table this until our next meeting.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Well, you're the second. I was the first second. So the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion of tabling the resolution on commissioner insurance benefits to the next meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So we have removed what was item 8.3, the revised wholesale telecom service agreement, and item 8.4 on the agenda is the broadband engineering contractor selection. And this is a Kevin item.
This is a will item.
Ah, okay.
Hello, commissioners. We, as part of our project to expand fiber to unserved residents in Jefferson County, and as part of our grants, we put in funding for engineering to do the final designs for building and construction management. When we've been working with CCG Engineering since last January. They provided the initial preliminary engineering that helped us do our basic cost estimates. And now we've got to do the final engineering. We put out the RFP. Let's see, I think here a few months back, we received 3 submissions. The 3 submissions were from Finley Engineering, Maverick Corporation, and Magellan Advisors. Of the 3, Finley was the only one to submit a complete proposal on time. Thankfully, they were also the lowest cost, so that was convenient. We are ultimately recommending that we select Finley and that you approve that selection. Their total cost estimate for engineering all of the grant projects that we have under development now, which includes the 3 that we have received funding for or have been awarded funding for, as well as the larger Reconnect project. Their total estimate was $3,622,764. That was less than Maverick. Magellan Engineering did not submit costs except for one project, which was our smallest Discovery Bay project. We further analyzed the estimates provided by the engineering firms, and Finley Engineering also came out the cheapest per foot of fiber, both underground and overhead. So we feel comfortable with the selection. This is the company that works with CCG Consulting and Doug Dawson often. So we're asking for your approval this evening.
Commissioner Tupper.
Thank you. So yeah, I have to say I was a little shocked when I saw the number for the engineering, about 1/6 of our grant money. So part of my question was, it says that all to most of Finley's costs will be recovered. Can we narrow that down a little bit more? I mean, do we know how much of this will not be covered by grants of this current 3.6? And then the other half of the question still remains, does that take care of everything that we have in the works for the grants we've taken so far? Or will this be kind of for the whole, are we anticipating this will be for the whole county when we have a couple other projects and grants that we're looking at come in, is there going to be a part 2 to this?
This is for all of the unserved areas of the county, all those projects that we've been developing. Beyond the, and it also would include the Public Works Board project to Port Townsend, the loan that we're looking at. Beyond that, it would not include engineering for the entire county. We have not yet discussed a model for expanding outside of those 2 zones, the unserved areas in the rural county and that business district that we identified. As far as the all to most, that was perhaps unfortunate phrasing on my part. Their engineering is certainly covered by all of the grants, but there's always the opportunity for cost overruns or for some things to be not as well anticipated as we could have designed up front. So, but the expectation is all of that will be covered by the grants. We designed the grants to be conservative in the sense that we anticipated we expected this. We wrote that we would spend more than we expect to. Sorry, going back and forth on my phrasing.
Commissioner Rand.
Will, when you put together the budget requests on the grant proposals, did you have in there an estimate for how much of the cost the engineering would be, and how does the low bid come out compared to what you hoped it would? And I guess, the big question will be, over time, how does the budget for this project look based on what materials are costing and so forth? But I guess this first question is, how does the engineering numbers coming in compared to what the initial budget was?
I believe this is under what we had put in for the engineering full grant. I would have to double check that. I can't say that 100% for certain, but that is what I believe.
Okay. And then the second question is, you're recommending we select this firm as the official engineers. What kind of due diligence did you do to check with their past clients to see about how they performed, both in terms of timeliness and cost and quality?
We relied somewhat on our consultant because they worked with them for a long time. We haven't entered to the contract selection stages, so we will do some more due diligence as we develop the contract. I suppose I should have worded this: authorizing the selection of basically where we need to move into the contract talk stage. So that's what we're asking for.
So it's basically authorizing kind of negotiation,
Yep.
And then you would come back with a final contract to us or not?
Kevin, how do you want to proceed with that?
It'd be similar to the meters. We'd come back with a contract, and then once the board approved it, we'd send it for their approval. We would negotiate things up front first, very similar to what we did on the meters, get it close, and then come back to the commission.
Okay, so you're really authorizing us to direct you to negotiate with them and bring back a final agreement. Okay, and I guess what I'm hearing you say is that the consultant who we've worked with extensively has positive experience with this firm.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, are there plans to have this kind of engineering capability in-house at some future time?
So we are doing engineering in-house, but it is for very small projects. Anytime we do these very large areas where it's like Discovery Bay, it only makes sense to go in and contract that out. But the smaller projects, we hope to be able to do all those in-house. It will take some hires and a little bit of work on our part, but the intent is, because right now we can do a small project, we would do small to mediums and then contract out large projects, especially grants where there's some tight timeframes and stuff that we have to get everything done by.
Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion authorizing I guess the general manager to enter into negotiations with Finley Engineering regarding the design and construction of fiber to the premises.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Is there further discussion or public comment? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
I have a couple of other, well, one more item under old business and then a little bit of new business. So the old business is adding the Juneteenth holiday. And is that a Melanie item?
I don't know if Melanie's going to do it or if I am. Your call, Melanie.
I can go ahead and talk about this one. So there was some prior discussion on adding Juneteenth to our holiday schedule. We are looking to get approval by motion to add Juneteenth to the holiday schedule for non-represented employees. This is a mandatory subject of bargaining with the unions, so we would need to pursue negotiations with the unions in order to implement this organization-wide.
Would one of my fellow commissioners like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll move that we add Juneteenth to our list of official holidays.
So is that what we need to do there? Or is it just to have Kevin and Melanie negotiate with the unions? I mean, is there two separate issues or is this just one issue?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We would like the board to approve it as a holiday. It goes to non-rep first, and then we will negotiate after that to the rest of the utility, the other two unions.
All right, thanks for the clarification. I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there further discussion or public comment? Hearing and seeing no further public comment, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. New business. Item 9.1, the Pleasant Harbor Water Reclamation Facility Agreement. And this sounds like a Samantha Harper item.
Hello, good afternoon, Commissioners. Yes, I'll jump right in. And so this is a discussion item for tonight. This is the PUD was approached by a representative from the Pleasant Harbor Marina and Golf Course Resort to form an agreement for the PUD to assume operations of the water reclamation and collection facilities for the Pleasant Harbor Marina and Golf Course Resort Master Plan community. So this is similar to the Aussie one that we discussed and approved maybe 3 or 4 months ago. Time is a little rough for me these days. WAC 173-240-104 allows for private ownership of domestic septic facilities, provided that there is an agreement in place with the public agency. And so I have listed here what those wastewater treatment plant and water collection facilities, what would happen to occur if, when and if the PUD ever needs to step in and provide operations facility services to the Pleasant Harbor Marina and Golf Course Resort. So it kind of goes into when we would provide the backup and how that would go. This is very, as I said before, very similar to the OWSI agreement we did in the past, and it includes the 2 addendums that were done over the last 20 years and the one that you all saw last October. We are working with Joel as well as the representative to go over the agreement, but I wanted to show everybody a first blush before we get too much into the details. So this was just a quick review, and if anybody had any questions or things to make sure that we discuss with the property owner.
Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. So, I understand the concept is to mimic the OWSI agreement. As I was going through this, I was a bit confused to some of the references in this when jumping back and forth between references to Port Ludlow and OWSI and, the PHMGR in down there at in the Brennan area. So on page 2, on item number 3, paragraph B, there is a typo on Port Ludlow system in there. It says Port Ludlow system.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So again, my question, and then there are some other references in here to Port Ludlow ratepayers. Obviously, this has to be cleaned up.
Yep.
I don't know if there's a little bit of cut and paste here exactly, but I was a little confused as I was reading through it to make sure that they're not going to go in on Port Ludlow's permit for their wastewater, right? This will be a completely separate permit and process for this group in Brennan.
Correct. This, as much as I've read in the sewer master plan, they're submitting it to, so they're in the submitting for their permitting stage, and the reclamation part, it's a reclamation class A system that would go into, I believe, an infiltration system, from what I've read so far.
Yeah, and
So
again,
yes, this is different where I believe OWSI has an outfall.
Yeah, and again, on page 4, item 6, paragraph B, it actually says, it says in there about they shall continue, the group down there in Brennan would continue collecting and retaining sewer connection fees from Port Ludlow property owners. And that, again, it's making a connection there, no puns intended, that this is somehow tied into the Port Ludlow, master plan resort, and it's not. So I hope that we can get all that verbiage and those things straightened out. There's others in there. I'll leave it to you guys. And if you have any questions, I guess you can get back to me, but there's a lot of references to OWSI and Port Ludlow customers and things like that we need to clean up in this.
Yeah, there's no need. I mean, this was their document, so we have not vetted this document.
Commissioner Randall.
Thanks, Sam. I have a few questions also. The first one is there a triggering event that caused this to come to us? Are they getting recertified or getting some sort of updated approval from the health department, or what's, I realize that the law allows for this, but are they required to do this by some event?
It's part of their process for submitting to ecology for the permitting for the facility. So this is one of the items that they need to get into place.
Okay.
And then, so that's what triggered it. And they just didn't know the timetable for us to go through our board. And I think it's just getting checklists and ducks in a row is how I understood it.
Got it. So then this is kind of a hypothetical if this were to happen and we had to step in. And I probably asked this question before on the OWSI proposal, but if we do have to step in the future, and then we identify capital improvement needs or some other, significant money that needs to be invested in the facility as part of taking it over, is that something that the state can possibly help with? I know we've just had this raid on the public infrastructure funds, but when these events happen, is there potentially assistance to the PUD as part of taking that over?
This one is structured similar to the OWSI, and it's not meant to take over, to assume ownership forever more, because the system has gone into degradation or neglect or something along those lines. This is more as a stopgap that they have 3 to 6 months is what the other agreement was to get back on track. So it's more of a, this is a bad analogy, a life raft more than this is not a document for us to assume ownership of the system. That would be a separate discussion and situation.
Okay, it's really kind of like we're emergency responders a little bit, where we're coming in and
Correct.
getting the facility back up to where it needs to be. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
And what stage are we at with the Pleasant Harbor facility? I mean, how far away hypothetically is it from being approved and actually going forward?
What the little bit I know so far is they have their engineering report ready to submit to ecology, and ecology's timeline for review. I have not asked that question yet. So they're just in that step of doing the review with ecology for their engineering report for the facility.
Yeah, and
Do you know?
Go ahead, Ken.
Do you know if there is a public process that will have to take place for this to be approved by the people most affected in the community?
I do know that the Jefferson County has a whole web page on this project in general for the master plan of Pleasant Harbor, and they have information. And I believe the last posting was from 2019, and they talk about the environmental, the EIS that was submitted by the developer. And there's quite a bit of information, but there's nothing on the website that's recent. Oh, well, within the past couple of years.
Okay.
But there is a dedicated, we used to call them a public information file for this project on the county's website.
Thank you. Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, Ken, I haven't followed the county for a while on this particular project. It was in the works for a decade at least, I think. And the county, they carved it down, and the amount of housing that's going to be involved with it and how they were going to deal with their outfalls and that sort of thing. All the county DCD and the county health department all have, making them go through the checklists and go through all that. So, it looks to me like, from what I'm seeing and hearing here, that they're moving forward. I don't know where they're at in construction or any of that sort of stuff. But again, this falls in line with what we do, we're going to do for Owsley. That was my concern too, is that we're not going to be, on the hook for, master planned resorts, sewer system. So because of whatever reasons, and I'm sure that Joel will make sure we don't get into any kind of quagmires like that.
So this was for discussion only. If there's no further discussion, we can move to the next item under new business, which looks like it's a Will O'Donnell item.
That would be correct.
Take it away, Will.
Okey doke. So we've been working on the retail broadband policy for a while. So this would be the policy that customers would review and then sign off on and acknowledge that they've seen it and agreed to the terms in order to receive retail broadband service from the PUD. We've done an extensive amount of work on it. We started with a draft of a template from CCG Consulting. Gene and Lori worked on that for a long time, trying to match it up with our policies. Recently, we've tried to pare it back a little bit to make it simpler. We are delaying the VoIP service. We're not going to be offering that anytime soon. So we took those mentions out of the policy. The policy references our data privacy policy, which we've already passed, and it provides the terms and services or terms and conditions for the customer. So what we want to do is just to present this to the board at this meeting, answer questions, have any discussions, and then hopefully bring it back at a later meeting for a possible vote. Any questions at this time?
I have a question. I have a question regarding the paragraph on service caps.
Yep.
And I wonder if it could be stated a bit more definitively that since we're offering different levels of service to people, that at a certain point in terms of the utilization, that an individual or a company would be in fact obligated to purchase a higher level of service, increased bandwidth.
Yeah, so we discussed this a lot with the consultant and looked at a number of options. Ultimately, what we chose to go with was setting the 7 terabyte limit. The concern on the networks in terms of congestion, by having an all fiber network, it's not really the speeds that are going to be the issue. It's more someone engaging in either commercial or activities that we don't want them to be doing on the network, that then congest and threaten the what we're calling the shared network. And that's going to be the majority of all residential users and the majority of business users, anybody that doesn't have a direct connection. So we set that 7 terabyte as a firm limit. And then we would have the option of either stopping service, suspending service of someone who goes beyond it, or if it's just the case of a very avid gamer, we have the chance to review it and see if it happens a couple of months in a row. And if we did have to move them towards a direct service, that would be the move that we would want to make, rather than have them bump up from, say, 100 meg up and down to a gig or something like that. That wouldn't really solve that problem, if that makes sense.
So what does one have to be doing to top out at 7 terabytes?
You would have to have a successful online retail business, mining crypto, some sort of video server for many, many customers. That's probably an illicit service, things like that. But it is possible that it could be, like I said, some kind of very successful retail business whose connection we would want to have, but we'd want to move them to the direct connection to the VLAN product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't just be a teenager gaming after school.
It would have to be,
or instead of school.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is these things are going to change over time. So who knows? Somebody may find a way to utilize all that space with some kind of crazy, AR, VR games in the future, but it would be unusual.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Tupper.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have the full text of this in front of me, so maybe you could, did we run this by any other utilities, ISPs that are utilizing this same verbiage and this same construct?
We have not run this by any of our neighboring utilities, so none of them are retail service. I could check with some, we could check with Opalco and some other folks that do have some retail service to double check. And Joel has reviewed the document and made lots of changes and suggestions.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it weighs in our favor at every turn. But again, I'm not going to, there's always that chance that we've missed something. Best thing is if someone has experienced it already.
I would have one, I guess I bolstered it from when I first saw it, but I'm just going to express my own view. It just seems a little too permissive to me, that we don't, as Commissioner Collins was saying up front, I'd like to see language in here that just said, we got the right to cut you off, period. And it probably says it in other places here in the policies, that we do have that right. But it's worth thinking about, Will, that we may want to say it directly in this context. Just a thought.
Sure, that would be happy to look at that.
And I have looked at some other ISPs, at least right now when we're looking at other equipment and I'm talking to, people in the industry. I'm saying, the debate is, do you go 5 or 7 terabytes? Those are the kind of discussions that are being had. Less of, we can cut you off, because we can cut them off. We can add some verbiage there to, to make everyone happy. But it right now on fiber to the home projects, it comes back to how much are they using and being able to stop that, because it can bring down a fiber network, and that's something we have to be cautious of.
And I guess one last question, Kevin, is this something that NOAANET would have some knowledge or expertise in?
They do, but we're not running much of our retail service stuff through NOAANET, because they are going to be a direct competitor of the PUD, I believe. I have some friends in the industry that I've called and talked to quite a bit on outside of NOAANET. They have great resources. I'm not saying they don't, but we're playing our cards close to the vest right now.
Thank you. Yeah, litigation, we definitely need to keep away from people being able to do stuff we don't want them to do, or being litigated because we're trying to stop it.
And Joel, thank you for expressing my concern more clearly than I was able to. Is there any further discussion on the retail broadband policy? Tom Tirsch, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. I took a look at this 21-page policy, and coming from the perspective of a potential customer, it reminds me more than anything of the Apple user agreement. It's ridiculously slanted in favor of the PUD, and sometimes for good reason, but in other cases, there are some really, not to insult the people who wrote it, but there are some absurd conditions in this policy that need to be cleaned up. Let's just start with 7 terabytes. It doesn't even say 7 terabytes per what? Per day, hour, week, month. It doesn't even say that in the policy, but that's just a trivial matter. There are some other really ugly things in this thing as it's written that they're unworkable. And they give the PUD rights to terminate the agreement without any administrative process, no appeals process, no whatever. It's just, yeah, we're going to cut you off and we just don't want you anymore. For whatever reason, we don't have to justify it, and you have no defense, and you can't take us to court for it. It's just, it's very distasteful. There are some other things in there that make no sense. That, if the PUD wants to, it can delete content that it finds objectionable. Well, you're not storing any content. The whole thing is it needs to have a really serious rewrite from the perspective of how an actual customer is going to be using the system, and not just throwing together every possible clause from a variety of contracts, which is what it looked like happened here. I mean, there are references to inside wiring. Sorry, folks, we're talking about a fiber optic system. We're not talking about telephone wires. I could go on and on, page after page, and give you detailed line by line objections, but what I prefer doing is have some sort of workshop conversation about how this thing really does not work for customers in the way that it's written. And, there just isn't time in 3 minutes to go through any kind of detail on all the things that are wrong with this. So if anyone is willing to have a conversation, I'm ready to do that. Thanks.
I think that that's a conversation worth having. And perhaps that should be between Will and Kevin and Mr. Tirsch, if they're all agreeable.
Yeah, I always welcome Tom's feedback.
Very
Uh,
good.
Oh, I also wanted to say that, you know, we anticipate that we're going to be revising this policy over time. This is our first crack at doing this policy. It will be even after passage, we expect to be revisiting it, and it will evolve. So there are chances for revision even after passage. Mr. Paisner wanted, as he said about the wanting to make it more certain that we have the right to cut off service and having stronger terms. That's what we tried to do with the wholesale broadband policy that we will bring back in another day, to do the same thing, and give it a revision. So we expect to do that in the future, and we welcome any more comments over the next couple of weeks, and we'll try to bring some more examples for further reference. Thank you.
Well, and we shouldn't overlook the hard work that's gone into this so far, and how we are so much further ahead in the area of broadband than we were a year ago, where it seemed like addressing the unserved and the underserved parts of our community was purely fantasy, a nice to have, but something that simply wasn't possible financially. And now we're looking at actually having the capability of moving forward, and I really, as an individual commissioner, appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. That being said, if there are any further comments for the good of the order, I'll allow a couple of minutes for that. And if not, then we will adjourn the meeting. And it looks like we have a silent consensus to do so. So thank you all for your participation. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.